The bitter Arctic wind howls across the desolate Scandinavian coastline as the first pale light of dawn cuts through a veil of mist. Scattered along the frozen shore lie the skeletal remains of ancient longships, their timbers splintered and blackened by centuries of relentless waves. Long ago, these very ships carried men whose names would echo through history, the Vikings. For centuries, they've been remembered as ruthless raiders, fearsome warriors who struck terror into the heart of medieval Europe. Their story has been told in sagas and legends, carved into runestones, and etched into our collective memory. But hidden beneath this legend lies a deeper truth. In a sterile, high-security laboratory at the University of Copenhagen, scientists carefully extract ancient bones. Inside these fragile remains lies DNA that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the Vikings. Join us on this journey. Like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from as we uncover the real story. For centuries, the image of the Vikings has been shaped by legends, medieval chronicles, and archaeological discoveries scattered across northern Europe. According to the traditional view, the Vikings were believed to be a homogeneous group of people, descendants of a pure Scandinavian lineage originating from what is now Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Their rise was explained as a natural expansion of a unified culture driven by seafaring skill, advanced weaponry, and a thirst for exploration and conquest. This theory was largely built on the interpretation of burial sites and artifacts discovered throughout Scandinavia. Among the most iconic finds are the Oseberg ship burial and the Gokstad ship, both excavated in Norway in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These spectacular graves, studied by pioneering archaeologists such as Gabriel Gustafsson and Håkan Sheteligs, contained exquisitely crafted ships, weapons, tools, and even preserved textiles. The skeletal remains found in these burials were carefully measured and analyzed. Early physical anthropologists, using the limited techniques of their time, concluded that the Vikings shared a common physical type: tall, robust individuals with strong bone structures and features consistent with a single northern European population. Linguists added further support to this idea by linking Viking expansion to the spread of Old Norse, the language carved into runestones and preserved in sagas like the Poetic Edda. Without modern technology, these interpretations were accepted as fact. The narrative was simple and compelling. The Vikings were one people, one bloodline, spreading outwards from Scandinavia to conquer, trade, and settle. This story shaped both academic research and popular imagination for over a century, appearing in museums, history books, and even modern television series. Yet, as science advanced, subtle cracks began to form in this seemingly solid foundation, hinting at a far more complex reality hidden beneath the surface. For decades, the traditional view of the Vikings remained unchallenged. Archaeologists, historians, and anthropologists relied on artifacts and skeletal measurements to piece together the story of these legendary seafarers. But in recent years, a quiet revolution has been taking place inside laboratories around the world, where advanced genetic technology is rewriting our understanding of the past. In September 2020, a groundbreaking study was published in the prestigious journal Nature, led by renowned geneticist Professor Eske Willerslev from the University of Copenhagen and the Wellcome Sanger Institute in the United Kingdom. Willerslev and his international team set out to answer a question that had lingered for centuries. Who were the Vikings, really? The project was unprecedented in scale. The team collected and analyzed 442 ancient human genomes from skeletal remains recovered at Viking Age sites across Europe and beyond. These sites included some of the most famous and historically significant locations connected to Viking history. Birka in Sweden, a major trading hub. Gokstad and Oseberg in Norway, sites of iconic ship burials. Orkney Islands and York in England, centers of Viking settlement. Gnezdovo in western Russia, evidence of trade routes reaching deep into Eastern Europe. Greenland representing the farthest edge of Viking exploration. What they discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. Instead of a single unified Scandinavian bloodline, the genetic evidence revealed a diverse and interconnected population. Some Viking warriors had DNA tracing back to southern Europe, including regions near the Mediterranean. Others showed clear genetic links to Central Asia and even Siberia, suggesting vast networks of migration and exchange. Even more surprising, several graves contained individuals who were genetically non-Scandinavian, yet buried with full Viking honors, including weapons, jewelry, and ships. This included a famous burial from Birka, once assumed to be a powerful male warrior, which DNA analysis shockingly confirmed to be female, a discovery that challenged long-held assumptions about gender roles in Viking society. These revelations shattered the old myth of the Vikings as a single, homogeneous people. Instead, they emerged as a multicultural, multi-ethnic civilization, far more complex and interconnected than historians had ever imagined. The saga of the Vikings, it seemed, was not one of purity and isolation, but of diversity, adaptation, and global reach. Beneath layers of ancient soil, frozen tundra, and centuries of myth, the true story of the Vikings remained locked inside fragments of bone and teeth. To unlock these genetic secrets, scientists needed more than just determination. They required cutting-edge technology, sterile laboratories, and techniques so precise that even the smallest mistake could destroy irreplaceable evidence. At the University of Copenhagen's Center for Geogenetics, led by Professor Eski Villerslev, the process began inside a high-security ancient DNA laboratory. Entering this facility is like stepping into another world. Scientists must wear full-body suits, masks, and gloves. Air is filtered and pressurized to prevent contamination from modern DNA. Every surface is sterilized with ultraviolet light. The ancient samples are treated like sacred relics, because, in many ways, they are. A single speck of modern human DNA could corrupt the results, making the past vanish in a haze of false signals. Inside this ultra-clean environment, a tooth or a fragment of bone is carefully selected. The first step is surface decontamination. The exterior of the sample is blasted with ultraviolet light and gently sanded away to remove any trace of modern contamination. Then, using specialized drills, the scientists access the untouched interior of the bone, where fragments of ancient DNA have been preserved for more than 1,000 years. The bone powder is placed into sterile tubes, and a series of chemical processes begins. Through enzymes and buffers, the DNA is extracted, separating it from proteins and other material. This is followed by purification, leaving behind only the fragile strands of genetic code. These strands are so degraded that they resemble a shredded ancient manuscript written in the countless tiny fragments. To read this genetic manuscript, the team uses high-throughput sequencing technology, primarily Illumina high-sec machines. These powerful instruments generate billions of short DNA sequences, which are then fed into advanced computational systems. Here, bioinformaticians work like digital detectives, aligning the fragments and comparing them to modern reference genomes. Bit by bit, the puzzle comes together, revealing the full genetic blueprint of a person who lived over a millennium ago. But the process doesn't end there. One of the biggest challenges is separating authentic ancient DNA from contaminants. Modern DNA, perhaps from an archaeologist handling the bones decades earlier, can easily overwhelm the ancient signal. To address this, the team examines specific patterns of chemical damage unique to ancient DNA. Over time, certain molecules degrade in predictable ways, leaving telltale signatures that allow scientists to distinguish the true ancient sequences from modern intruders. As the data flowed in, fascinating patterns began to emerge. Among the most striking were genetic adaptations that revealed how Viking populations lived and thrived in extreme northern environments. Some individuals carried gene variants similar to those found in the Sami people, indigenous inhabitants of Arctic Scandinavia. These genes are associated with adaptations to cold climates, including efficient fat metabolism and thermoregulation, key traits for survival during long, harsh winters. Other discoveries shed light on the diseases and health challenges faced by Viking communities. For instance, certain genes linked to the body's immune response suggested that Vikings were both victims and carriers of devastating pandemics. Intriguingly, some Viking-age genomes contain variants connected to resistance or vulnerability to Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the plague. This raised the possibility that Viking trade routes and voyages may have played a role in the spread of deadly diseases across medieval Europe. Perhaps most astonishingly, several individuals displayed genetic markers tracing back to regions far beyond Scandinavia. One skeleton uncovered in Greenland carried genes closely related to ancient populations of Siberia. Another individual from Gnezdovo, a Viking trading settlement in present-day Russia, showed links to populations along the Silk Road. These findings painted a picture of the Vikings not just as raiders, but as participants in a vast interconnected network, stretching from the Arctic Circle to Central Asia. The scale of this diversity challenged every previous assumption. It suggested that Viking society was not an isolated warrior culture, but a dynamic, cosmopolitan civilization engaged in trade, migration, and cultural exchange on a global scale. These revelations also connected to earlier breakthroughs in ancient DNA research. For example, the discovery of the EPAS1 gene variant in modern Tibetans, inherited from the long-extinct Denisovans, had shown how ancient interbreeding could shape human adaptation. In a similar way, certain Viking Age gene patterns hinted at long-forgotten encounters and migrations, invisible to archaeology alone. By the end of the analysis, the team had reconstructed a sweeping genetic map of the Viking world. It was no longer just a story told through sagas and swords, but through the molecules hidden deep inside ancient bones. This genetic map revealed connections between distant communities, migrations spanning thousands of miles, and the intimate biological threads that tied individuals together across continents. As Professor Eske Willerslev summarized in his publication in Nature, the Viking world was far more diverse and interconnected than we ever imagined. Their DNA shows us a history of mobility, mixing, and adaptation, a history written not only in artifacts, but in the very fabric of life itself. The atmosphere inside the laboratory was tense, almost electric, as the final sequences were compiled. Months of painstaking work, thousands of fragments of ancient DNA, and endless hours of computational analysis had led to this moment. The data streams converged on a single screen, forming a colorful, intricate map of Viking genetic connections across continents. Professor Eske Willerslev and his team gathered around the monitor in silence. At first glance, the results seemed almost unbelievable. The genetic map was far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. It revealed a world in constant motion, where people, ideas, and genes flowed freely between distant regions. Then came the most shocking revelation of all. In a grave on the Orkney Islands, off the northern coast of Scotland, the remains of a high-status Viking warrior had long been celebrated as a symbol of Scandinavian conquest. For over a century, historians assumed this individual to be a powerful male chieftain. But the DNA told a different story. The skeleton belonged to a woman. Her genetic profile confirmed Scandinavian ancestry, yet her burial included a full set of weapons, armor, and a war horse, suggesting she had been a respected warrior in her own right. This discovery overturned centuries of assumptions about gender roles in Viking society, revealing that women could hold positions of military power and command. The surprises didn't stop there. Another individual buried in Greenland displayed genetic markers tracing back to ancient Siberia, indicating an astonishing migration route stretching across the Arctic. Meanwhile, remains from the trading settlement of Gnezdovo in present-day Russia showed connections to populations along the Silk Road, proof of far-reaching trade networks linking the Viking world to Asia. As these findings were confirmed, the room erupted with a mix of awe and disbelief. It was as if the ghosts of the Viking Age were speaking directly through their DNA, telling a story that had been buried for 1,000 years. The old narrative of the Vikings as a single, isolated people was gone forever. In its place stood a new vision, a vibrant, diverse civilization whose reach spanned oceans and continents, a world more interconnected than anyone had ever dared to imagine. As the magnitude of the findings sank in, it became clear that this was more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of the Viking Age and, by extension, of human history itself. For centuries, we have told stories that reduce the past to neat categories: one people, one culture, one identity. The DNA evidence shattered these illusions, revealing that history has always been a complex web of connections. The Vikings were no longer just fearsome warriors and raiders. They emerged as agents of exchange, bridging distant worlds through trade, migration, and intermarriage. Their ships did not merely carry swords and shields. They carried languages, ideas, technologies, and genes. They connected the icy fjords of Scandinavia with the bustling markets of the Mediterranean, the windswept steppes of Central Asia, and the mysterious frontiers of the Arctic. This new vision changes how we see ourselves today. The discovery of genetic diversity among the Vikings reminds us that human identity is fluid, not fixed. Just as they were shaped by countless interactions across borders and cultures, so too are we the product of generations of movement and mingling. In an age where migration and globalization define the modern world, the Vikings stand as an ancient mirror reflecting our present reality. Beyond cultural meaning, the study also has practical implications. Certain Viking Age gene variants identified in this research are linked to modern health conditions. Understanding these genetic markers can help scientists today investigate diseases prevalent in Northern Europe, from autoimmune disorders to metabolic syndromes. Ancient DNA, once locked away in silent bones, is now guiding modern medicine and deepening our understanding of human biology. Ultimately, these revelations remind us that no civilization exists in isolation. The saga of the Vikings is not just their story, it is our story. Their blood still flows in millions of people alive today, a living testament to the interconnectedness of all humankind. The past, it seems, is never truly gone. It lives within us, written in the language of our genes. As the cold waves crash against the rugged Scandinavian coast, the remnants of ancient longships lie silent beneath the sand. These vessels once carried warriors, traders, and explorers across vast and dangerous seas. Today, their stories no longer live only in sagas or broken artifacts. They live inside us, in the delicate strands of DNA passed down through countless generations. The research led by Professor Eske Willerslev and his team has revealed a profound truth. The Vikings were not a single, isolated people, but part of a vast, interconnected human story. Their bloodlines reached from the icy fjords of Norway to the distant steppes of Asia, from the windswept shores of Greenland to the bustling ports of the Mediterranean. As we look to the future, these discoveries remind us that we are all connected, bound by shared histories written in our very genes. The past is never truly gone. It flows within us, shaping who we are today. If this journey through time has inspired you, join our community of explorers. Like this video, subscribe for more incredible discoveries, and share in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Together, let's keep uncovering the stories hidden in our DNA.